You're listening to Barely Legal in Web3. I'm your host, Jamilia Grier. This podcast is an unapologetic look at what's happening in tech from a lawyer's perspective. In addition to Tech Talk, each Monday I'll be sharing insights from my journey from lawyer in small town Connecticut to an entrepreneur in Dubai. Sound like fun? Go ahead and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. Now let's get into it. Today we have an incredible guest, Professor Tonya Evans from Penn State Dickinson Law School. Professor Evans is a leading expert at the intersection of law, technology, and innovation. She's a renowned speaker, author, and the host of the Tech Intersect podcast. Professor Evans is also the author of an insightful book, Digital Money Demystified. In this episode, we're diving deep into the future of digital assets in law, the improvements needed in the education system to prepare lawyers, ethical considerations in the tech space, and career advice for young lawyers and those looking to pivot. We'll also discuss what inspired her to start her own podcast and how she's contributing to the broader conversation on law and technology. Oh, and before we get started, make sure to subscribe to Barely Legal in Web3 on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on social media at ByteBow for updates on future episodes and exclusive content. If you find this episode valuable, please leave a review and share it with your network. Now let's get started. Professor Tonya Evans, welcome to the show. Welcome to Barely Legal in Web3.
Thank you, Counselor. It is always a pleasure to connect with you on our favorite topic, of course.
Of course, and I have been looking forward to this conversation for a while. There's been a lot that has happened since the last time we spoke, but I figured, we've got so much that we can talk about, so we're just going to hit the heavy topics today.
Excellent. I'm ready.
Great. So one of the things that, has been on my mind recently as the world is becoming more aware of emerging technology and it's becoming more aware of particularly things like AI and even digital assets in this space, is what do you see is the role of the law in emerging technology? And we as lawyers, and particularly yourself in the space of doing consulting and then also legal education, what is our role in this fast-paced evolution?
I think at the macro level, even regardless of the technology, I always think of our role and position as problem solvers. At the end of the day, you think of the legal skills that we learn in law school and then out in practice. We're always listening to a story. We are always looking for the issues, the legal issues, but people are sitting in front of us and telling us a story, or an industry is playing out a narrative, which is also a story. And it's our role at our existing area of expertise to find out what are the common issues, what are issues that we've seen before, what are novel issues. It's like we may not have the answer, but we at least know that there are legal questions to answer, and then seek to solve problems for clients, solve problems for industries, solve problems for legislators, to make sense of, and now kind of this is the business head as well, how do you protect people, protect businesses while also empowering them to leverage technology in a way that is innovative and moves society forward. So, there's so many lawyer jokes, and it's always funny until you need one. And so
yes,
when I think of, when I think of this particular ecosystem that we both work in, it is, there's no shortage of issues and novel questions, but also some that even if they need to be reimagined, sometimes you've seen them before, but then you need to recontextualize. I'm an intellectual property lawyer by training, and so I see through that lens and also the lens of an educator. But at the end of the day, it's about identifying issues, identifying opportunities, and then solving the problems that move society forward.
It's interesting that you mentioned this. It's interesting that you had mentioned this idea of older problems or sort of new ways that old problems are being presented. And I just find it so fascinating that there is always this narrative that's going on that, oh no, we don't have laws on this, or we don't have laws on, how do we use AI in the context of fashion, and what if this happens, and people present scenarios, and there is this myth or this assumption that we don't have any rules of the road. But in my mind, it seems to me that we do have some inkling based upon what we've learned in other bodies of law. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think you were kind of headed down that path.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're pausing here to take a deeper dive on this topic. And I find, when you and I have all these conversations with new entrants, new business people into the space, there may be legacy businesses moving um, into this digital asset economy. It may be investors or innovators. But writ large and kind of at a macro level, everybody has this misperception that it's completely the wild, wild west. And there are no rules and laws. And interestingly, I remember I entered the space in 2017, kind of having these same conversations with innovators specifically in the crypto ecosystem that believed that disruptive technology could just come in but be separate and apart of and completely off of the legal and regulatory grid. And as a lawyer, that just never made sense to me. This technology, the first major disruptive impact in finance and banking is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world. So to think that there would be no consequence or no existing rules that have some impact, I think was a foolish errand. And then from the other side of that, when I think of businesses or individuals, I don't blame them because I think a lot of the headlines would suggest that this is completely the quote unquote wild, wild west. There are no rules and regulations. Ask Sam Bankman-Fried how that's going, right? From the moment that he was apprehended in the Bahamas until his sentencing was 1 year. That was faster than Bernie Madoff, right? Even though the activities, the same, kind of Ponzi scheme as Madoff or Lehman Brothers, et cetera. And so hopefully the narrative can shift to kind of recontextualize or demystify. I wrote about that in Digital Money Demystified, kind of separating fact from fiction. We do have existing laws. It's fraudulent behavior by any means or measure. It's fraudulent behavior. We have existing securities rules and regulations. We have enforcement agencies as well. Now, that's not to say that it's all cut and dried. You and I both know that sometimes there's overlap, particularly here where I am in the United States. We have, the alphabet soup of oversight committees in the legislative branch. We have an alphabet soup of regulators in the executive branch wrangling for position and trying to redefine what it means to regulate and enforce in this particular environment. And I will say, and I'd be interested if you agree, law is intentionally meant to move slowly because we're, depending upon the system under which you are operating, having precedent before gives us an indication of how to move forward. Sometimes the facts are squarely within the previous case, most often not, right? You have novel facts and novel situations. And the question becomes whether based upon these facts, the existing laws will resolve the issue. If not, then we start to look for maybe a hybrid submission opportunity, or do we need something completely new? And that's where we find ourselves to define where the gray areas are, where the black boxes are, so that there's some greater clarity. And that, I think, is the bigger issue here in the United States and in some other places around the world. So it's not a complete absence of rules and regulations, but further clarifications about how this novel asset class has the commonalities with existing assets, but also is quite different in a way that we've not seen before.
Yeah, it sounds like it's almost a convenient excuse to say that there are not existing laws and regulations on certain emerging technologies when we know how other technologies are regulated and controlled, and we know how industries, you mentioned banking and finance, are regulated and controlled. But then the flip side of that is if lawmakers see that there's an urgency to put things in place and to set up guardrails, and industry is asking for things, doesn't it beg the question is, what's taking so long? What's taking so long, right? And we have two different sides of the game. And, one side is certainly not going to get a pass for claiming that they didn't know, or that, there are no rules and regulations in place. But then you look at the other side, and isn't there a question of what is your responsibility in this?
So powerful. This could be a whole show in and of itself, just this topic. You know that I was before Congress in March of 2023 talking about what's essentially taking so long for the SEC at the time to move forward. Bitcoin has been around since January 2009. The Ethereum virtual machine came online was 2014, 2015. These technologies and the technologies that underpin blockchain and cryptocurrencies and smart contracts are really built upon an existing framework or reconfiguration of existing technologies, right? Peer-to-peer technology, the internet, cryptography, then you're adding on top of things. We've had these same debates around the internet and how to regulate so many of the concerns about Web 1.0 or 2.0, bad, fraud, scam, only for, illicit activity. And so they can no longer make the argument that we don't know, we don't have the language for this. It's 2024 as we are having our conversation. People from the industry, including myself, have been before legislative bodies that create the framework under which subject matter experts actually go forward and carry out the daily activities, right? So that's why we rely here in the States on a legislative branch to create an enabling act, some type of legislation, not only to create an agency, but to kind of give them the framework in order to move forward, allowing, in the best case scenario, that subject matter expert, let's use the SEC, to go forth and kind of fill in the blank, kind of be like the mortar, right, to the bricks. But unless and until a legislative branch tweaks, the executive branch is left to do it something or nothing, to your point. And so when we look at the SEC having this responsibility to protect investors, my point before the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Digital Assets was, how are investors being protected? That is one of the calls of the SEC when some of our most trusted actors are constantly under attack, while an FTX under the same watch can go forward. That makes no sense. And destabilizing an environment, we call it a choke point 2.0, this idea of cutting off banking and making it very, very difficult for an industry to move forward and become a part of the overall industry, is extremely harmful, not only to investors and innovators, but also the role, that America has to decide for itself in what role or in what capacity will this country participate. Will it be a leader? Will it be a follower? You can't opt out of a global economy, or if you do, decisions have consequences. And I think we're experiencing that, to the point of your question of not acting sooner to create clarity. Not acting sooner to create clarity is a choice. It's a feature, not a bug of the current administration's approach to this. And I'm supportive of the administration. So it often pains me to say this, but you got to call a thing a thing. And so it is no longer acceptable to sit on the sidelines and to wait, because this technology and the rest of the world wait for no country. Probably.
One of the things that I've realized, and thank you for that comment, because I think that was a really thorough 360 view of the situation in terms of who is harmed, because you mentioned the duty and the obligation to investors, but then there's also the duty and obligation to Joe Smith and, any other person who is purchasing certain products and doesn't really have a full understanding of how these products work. So my original question to you is going to be who is harmed, but I think you've pointed out who is harmed. It is the everyday person who's harmed by this delay and by this choice and this sort of back and forth in terms of what are we going to build and how is it going to look? And I think another point of that I would raise is that entrepreneurs who want to build businesses in the U.S. Are also harmed because they're not able to innovate. They're actually fear struck at this point about what they can and can't do.
Mm-hmm. And to your point about investors, one thing I didn't touch on, but I hear also in the follow-up is I also think there's harm in the lack of a first mover opportunity to participate. Because when people look at the headlines and it just feeds into the narrative of all of the myths and the misperceptions and misconceptions that are really, some is misinformation, but a lot can be disinformation. When there's no counter narrative to the headlines of one St. Bankman-Fried or Three Arrows or all the other things that happen. And I want no parts of bad actors in the space to do everybody a disservice and harm. But I think of all of those investors, it makes me think of investors of color, it makes me think of women, those that may be in areas where it makes it difficult for any reason. It could be about race, it could be about gender, it could be about religion, from participating meaningfully in the local economy and the global economy. We still, in the United States, we still have that, where there are people who could have benefited from the knowledge and therefore the early market participation that will never have that opportunity again. If they start today, great. The better day before today was yesterday, the better day before yesterday, and so on. So the harm is really incalculable across platforms. I think we will look back at this time and think that this was really an egregious moment in the United States. And hopefully as we move forward, I don't think it's a matter of if, but not when. Now we have, you and I were talking about the exchange traded funds. An ETH exchange traded fund will be offered. It's not a matter of if, but when at this point. Even the delay of products like that, I find it egregious how you can give a green light on the future side, but not underlying spot Bitcoin ETF, for example. The logic isn't logicate is basically what I'm saying. And hopefully we have better days ahead.
The logic isn't logic. Logicking is a very nice way to put that. I want to segue a bit and talk about, you're trying. It's great. It's commendable. And I see that. I want to segue a bit and talk about, so we've talked about this delay and this sort of either, we can say it's either confusion or dragging the feet, but it is a choice in the delay of laying out that very clear, much needed framework in the United States. And then the focus, we have lawyers who are in the space in one way or the other. They're either advocating for certain laws and regulations to be put in place, or they're working inside of these companies that are attempting to roll out new innovative products, or they are working on behalf of smaller companies that are looking to enter the space. And so I want to talk a little bit about the role of lawyers here. And, there are a lot of listeners that are looking to get into the space, but they're not really sure of the value they can add. And I have some ideas on that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what kind of value can lawyers add in this climate?
I think of, it kind of takes me back to the first question that you asked me about just our role in general. And then to ask this more pointed question of the value, which I think is a distinct but related point. And the absence of the lawyer in the room, even though some would say, don't talk to legal until the end, right? It's kind of like traditionally you might have technologists and you have marketing, and then everybody else agrees. And the C-suite signs off pending approval by the lawyers, legal. It's a terrible way to do business now. It probably wasn't great before, but the consequences of leaving the pesky little details around the legalities or legal opinions in kind of an uncertain space. The idea of moving forward as an innovator to break, fill in the blank, and figure it out later, the consequences are even greater at this moment in time. The voice of a lawyer, a legal professional in the room is invaluable. But in order to be in the room, in order to spot the issues, in order to problem solve, you actually have to speak the language. It is no longer a nice to have to be well-versed, at least, or, cognizant of the changes in financial technologies, the changes in information privacy and security, the changes in the organization of governance, the way that contracts are executed, the legal and regulatory risks. Every lawyer needs to understand that, whether or not you practice in this space, because crypto law or blockchain law is not a monolith, and it's not a separate and distinct thing. It is an overlay over every first-year law course that we take. Property, torts, contracts, civil procedure, and then as you move forward, criminal law, for sure, property. All of these things are impacted necessarily by technology, and depending upon where you practice, as a matter of ethics, because I know that is of significant import to you as well. The competence to practice law in most jurisdictions, and certainly throughout the United States, includes technological competency. And that's more than turning on the laptop. And we saw a lot of our colleagues couldn't even do that in the pandemonium. So the consequences of not learning enough about the intersection, and this is the way that I entered this particular ecosystem, what was going on at the intersection of intellectual property and blockchain. Simple search. That was my rabbit hole experience, because at the time, 2017, I wasn't particularly interested in magic internet money that was a fad, a scam, and only used by criminals. I had to challenge my own notions, assumptions, disinformation, and we're trained to see the risks. Saw all the risks, but what I didn't have was a right-sized understanding of the opportunity. And that made me the smartest person in many a room. You want to move ahead professionally, and this is actually what I'm focusing on this summer, moving away temporarily, not moving away, but instead of focusing exclusively on investors or even innovators, I want to focus on professionals. There are not enough of us in the rooms that are shaping the future of an industry with, when we think about the market cap or any particular coin or token or project, let alone the entirety of the ecosystem, decentralized finance. This is the new version of the evolution. In some instances, revolution, but at least the evolution of the internet. If you're not speaking about this and understanding the connection between your existing area of expertise and this new technology, not only will you be left behind, you expose your licensure to risk, to myth an issue, to misapply a law, to not understand or appreciate cross-jurisdictional issues. This is a global ecosystem. And so there's great opportunity for those of us who actually participate. You're not going to know all the things about all the things, but take a deep dive where you are. And then you can have conversations with your partners or associates, certainly your clients, your colleagues, your partners. You will be participating professionally And so that's why I'm so passionate, and I know you are as well, to empower lawyers to answer the questions, to spot the issues that we started off speaking about. I'm just so clear, and I'm hoping that more of our colleagues will be too. It's not a nice to have at this point, but it's a pain point that we all have to navigate. Problem.
I full-heartedly agree. We absolutely need to start embracing this gaping need to learn about technology beyond a threshold level, and to learn about the applications of technology as it relates to our business clients beyond the threshold level. And, as you were speaking and you were talking about this need and also this gap, I sort of started to wonder, when I think of all the professions and I think about continuing education, why do you think lawyers are somewhat resistant to this? At least it seems to me that there may be a resistance to learning and embracing this. Is there something that happens after the license is given that there's a resistance? So, but we do CLEs, and a lot of people are, some people complain about that, but this is bigger than a CLE. This is a pivot to beyond the law as it is. And do you see resistance to it? And if so, why do you think that is?
Resistance is an understatement. It is so frustrating. And the only thing more frustrating, talking to a bunch of lawyers about this, and I'm doing a Practicing Legal Institute presentation soon. So I'll be able to report back after that, whether I'm still booed off of stages or now, today's prices are not yesterday's prices. So see me now or see me later. But there is the only more difficult group is in academia, as a full tenured professor having these conversations. And to your point, infusing the learning aspects of this technology across the curriculum, I think it's hopefully not a matter of if but when, but it's been really, really challenging to kind of change course. On one hand, I feel like because we are in a position to spot issues and risks, I think as a group, lawyers are necessarily risk averse. In an industry that is very, very challenging, it makes us nervous when we can't rely on past precedent or future indications. I'm going to use a word that it keeps coming to my head. Some of it can be laziness about it's a nice to have. It's already been defined. It's illegal. Not too many people are asking me about it. Or I talked to my partner and they said, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, because his or her financial advisor said, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, because their insurance provider says, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, because we have choke point 2.0 and the government said, don't touch it with a 2, right? And we see that there's this interconnectedness, and they had the freedom and the space. And think of how the industry developed from a cypherpunk perspective. It was just the fringes. It was like a microcosm of a microcosm. It's tech and finance come together. There's people who wanted to be off the grid, down with the government, down with the dollar. So that frightens people as well. Understandably so. We are in the midst of an emerging asset class, in the same way that we see other emerging industries that started out, the regulatory aspects and legal consequences were uncertain, but allowed to flourish because of the overriding benefit when you do a cost-benefit analysis of railroads or space travel or driving with vehicles. And all of these things are very, very dangerous and uncertain in the beginning, and over time, as the technology develops, as people get more comfortable, as legislators start to figure out the parameters and people feel more comfortable, more and more people buy. Think of computers. Computers used to be ginormous and they take up like a plane hangar. And now we're sitting here with a phone or a tablet. It's all the same, but you have to give it time and space. And lawyers are just very resistant to change unless forced to. And so that's why my angle of even saying in our conversations, not a nice to have, a need to have, not only to be able to have a conversation about the issues, but also to really be leaders and trailblazers of defining the parameters of law at this time. That's literally watching the plane being built as it is flying, which means it's more important for lawyers to be involved, not less so, if that makes sense.
I love that. It's more important for them to be involved and less so. I think that just it sort of sums up the entire conversation in terms of the role, the value, what happens if we're not involved, and why lawyers really need to overcome this resistance to learning about what's happening in this space. Critical thinking, we are trained to think critically, but sometimes we're not trained what to think critically about. And that is a very different question. Sometimes too much training doesn't give you the bandwidth to question why you're being trained something. And I will let people read into that comment and think what they might. But one thing I wanted to ask you before we let you go, Dr. Evans, is for law students, for new lawyers that are thinking about getting into this space, they may be overwhelmed in terms of, where to start learning. Of course, ByteBow has Barely Blockchain, and we offer training to lawyers and to new law students who are looking to get into this space. But what really are the tools and the skills that they should have if they want to get into this evolving and emerging tech space?
Leave your law school training at the door after you pass the bar and start thinking like an entrepreneur. In fact, don't leave all the things, because what Jamilia has shared is so vitally important. The idea of our critical thinking skills. We need to, my favorite word at this moment is reimagine. We need to reimagine what critical thinking and issue spotting and problem solving, what all of those things look like when you are also functioning as an entrepreneur. That is a seismic shift in the way that traditional legal practices, law practices are set up. It's not to be entrepreneurial. It's quite the opposite, which may speak to the previous question about the hesitation or the resistance. It's, I think about this idea of the new collar professional, this idea of white collar and blue collar, of having actionable professional skills. And so I offer, I've just been thinking about it and looking to write about this idea of what the new collar lawyer looks like. I have to call it something different, the new lawyer. But the idea that you take your critical thinking, but everything is not going to be black letter law when you're moving forward into a new space where you're taking the old technology is coming together and you're trying to figure out how it fits. And looking for this neat puzzle piece is just not realistic. It probably never was. Perhaps things were more well-defined when people were more insular. You're in your little town, your little city, your little state, your little country. You no longer have the privilege of operating as attorneys, as problem solvers in that way. So as, and I'm so excited when I'm with my law students, Jamilia, I actually think they get it pretty well. The numbers in my blockchain, crypto, and law course, off the charts. There, I've seen over the years, I started teaching this in 2018 and building a professional certificate program around that time too, or 2019. To see the evolution, God bless my young millennials and Gen Z and coming in, it's just not a heavy lift. And they're looking for opportunities. They speak the language. And so writing effectively and clearly and not in 30 pages is a good place to start. Nobody's going to pay you $100,000 to send them a 50-page thing that takes a month and at the end says it depends. No one. Right? If they are, please call me. I'm happy to do that. But I'm pretty sure people are over that. Right? They're over your billable hours. They're over it. Right. We're just in an environment where there's information overwhelm. We're no longer in the information age. Information, check. How do you curate and cultivate that so it quickly makes sense for people to move forward? So the ability to be nimble and flexible will be invaluable. And I don't know that we teach that in law school, but those are things that I've worked with in an experiential course with my students. And so I offer that to them as well. But
That's amazing. And I think that those are all critical skills that are right up there at the top of the list that lawyers that have been practicing or even new lawyers should have in entering this space. And of course, you have some resources and materials. Dr. Evans, can you tell us a bit about the book and other resources that you offer and where people can actually find you?
Well, I'm really excited about the book, and it came out. It's called Digital Money Demystified. It was released in October 2023. It'll be a perennial thing. It was difficult to write a book about digital money in a way that would allow it to be evergreen. But I think these myths will continue to persist still around the world. Probably less than 10% of people hold virtual currencies currently, but it continues to go up and up and up. So people will continue to enter the space, continue to have questions. So whether you are a law student or a legal professional looking to at least set a proper foundation, I really offer the book as an easy and affordable way to at least level set so that either it's your first stop on the way, or maybe you are taking a winding and narrowing path and you were following FOMO and now you need to reset or take a second look. Or maybe you think you're Satoshi and then maybe you should read it and then you let me know afterwards, right? There are a lot of things that we don't know that we don't know. And so that's a good first stop. You can do that at digitalmoneydemystified.com. And the book is available wherever books are sold, not only in the United States, but we are starting to reach out globally as well. If you don't see it, ask for it and ask for, with 10,000 of your closest friends, and we'll make sure that happens too. And then for professionals who are looking to engage in a summer cohort with me and some of my best lawyers in and around the world, hint, that I'm hoping to rope into this as well. We'll find people in every discipline to put a cohort together so that in discrete, actionable bites, you get what you need. I believe in composable education, not kind of the long form. And I'm a full tenure professor, but I'm here to tell you that education has changed forever, or it should. And we need to rethink the way that we are educating our professionals. And so I know you're working very hard in that space, and I am as well. So you can learn all about that in masterclasses at advantageevans.com. Both of those websites will have access points from my social media. I'm quite active professionally and personally, a good, bad, or otherwise. So if you like a joke or WNBA information on the weekends, please follow IP Prof Evans. But you can find all of that information, again, at advantageevans.com. What?
Professor Evans, thank you so much for your time today. I'm sure many people listen to this and they have a new view and a new lens on what it takes to succeed in the space today. So thank you so much. And I would love to have you back again.
Please, I want to be your correspondent. I want to go out in the world and say funny things and bring
I'd love that.
Thank
you so much, Dr. Evans.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Barely Legal in Web3. I hope you found our conversation with Professor Tonya Evans as insightful and inspiring as I did. If you're passionate about blockchain and want to take your legal career to the next level, I invite you to join Barely Blockchain, our new online community for lawyers. Barely Blockchain offers comprehensive courses, networking opportunities, and chances to work with real blockchain companies from all around the world. Don't miss out on the opportunity to be part of a forward-thinking community that shapes the future of tech in law. If you'd like to learn more, just visit bytebow.io/barelyblockchain. I'll include the link in the notes. Let's continue to drive the conversation forward together. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay safe out there in those crypto streets. Take care. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. I appreciate when you guys tune in and the time that you take to listen to the show and support us. And I have one thing that I'd love for you to do that would really help us out, which is rate the show. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you rate it. You can do it on whatever platform you're listening on. That would do wonders for us. And if you really want to be a super fan and really support the show, there's a link below that you can support us and donate a small monthly contribution, which allows us to continue to create great content for you. Thanks so much again. Appreciate you and see you next time.